Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Manon Bolliger, a retired and deregistered naturopathic physician with 30 plus years of experience. Here you will discover engaging and informative conversations between experienced healers, covering all aspects of healing, the personal journey, the journey of the practitioner, and the amazing possibilities for our own body and spirit.
Right.
Welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have with me Shaman Shu, affectionately known as Shaman Shu. He's also Dr. Shu, who founded Soul Tribes International Ministries in Detroit, Michigan. He's a gifted spiritual healer, passionate about empowering individuals towards self-discovery and inner peace through the gift of human connection. Now, the ministry, through the healings, uses sacred plant medicine, including psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca, iboga, and others to transform mind, body, and soul. So welcome. And I guess my first question to you.
Thank you for having me.
What you're welcome. I just got to get right to it. So what inspired you to go down this particular journey, or was this in stages? And yeah, what is your story?
Well, Sister Manon, thank you for having me first and foremost. Truly an honor to meet a kindred spirit that's all about healing our people. Myself never would have thought that I would be talking about sacred plants or shamanic work ever in my life. You know, my past life, if you will, was a businessman. I bought and sold companies, grew up in major private equity firms, traveled around the world, corporate raider. I've bought companies, sold companies, that type of thing. And along the way, I kept hearing this inner voice saying that there's more to life than those experiences and things. And so I would say about 15 years ago, I started moving down my other path. And in order to do that, I came with this crazy idea to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And so coming into this universe, having asthma and climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, those two things didn't connect. And so in order to do that, I had to spend some time with other shamans to learn how to breathe. They taught me different breathing techniques. They taught me different breath work techniques. And I use those things to face my fear, to face my issues. And I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro back in 2010. Wow. That was an amazing experience, to having asthma and be having that challenge on the mountain. And so I realized that there were some other things outside of myself. I spent time literally having conversations with ascended beings, angels and fairies and things that I never really believed existed. I thought it was just a Marvel and Avenger movies. You know, I thought that that's what that was. And so along the path, I went from that to spending time. I spent many years on the continent of Africa, you know, hanging out with, you know, ancient leaders, chiefs, and tribal leaders, also understand the business side. Then in COVID was the real pivot for me. I say many people actually physically died in COVID. I died a different type of death. And so, you know, I was, my wife now, we were just dating at the time, we were living together. And, you know, dealing with the trauma that I had in life, that trauma showed up in me hurting other people. And so I realized that, you know, I put my wife through pain. I put myself, of course, first. You always start with yourself through pain. And I could not get on a plane and leave. I would have said, I'm sorry for the errors that and the pain I caused you. But normally, you know, we apologize. We get on a plane and we do other things. I was forced to sit in that house for a year and to deal with my ugly self, to see me in a place that I didn't want to be. And so I decided at that moment, I would never be that type of person again. I would be the best version of myself. After that experience, I wound up going to Costa Rica right after that. And I spent 4 days with shamans in Costa Rica, literally with an ayahuasca ceremony, thrown up in a bucket. Blew me away. And, you know, I would have never tried. I was there on a fluke trip. I always thought that it was a European thing. It was something that, you know, only white people did, that psychedelics and ayahuasca and those types of things. But at that moment, I realized that these indigenous plants are for everybody, and they came from the original indigenous people.
Right.
And so that forced me to go further with my journey. After coming back from that experience in Costa Rica, came back to Detroit and said, wait a minute, what can I do to liberate people that cannot afford to go to Costa Rica? And with that, I hired a law firm, hired a lobbyist, and we wrote a petition to decriminalize sacred plants in Detroit, Michigan. And so now Detroit's the largest city in the country that people can go and have access to their healing. And that's how I got started in a short version.
That's quite something. Huh. That's interesting. So, it's interesting because I'm in British Columbia, and they're decriminalizing, but not necessarily sacred plants. It's more like,
Sure.
other kinds of drugs, and we're having all this issue. And so it's funny that they would actually decriminalize something that has true healing potential. It's funny.
Well, I put it on the ballot, and what was interesting, Detroit's a major urban city,
Yeah.
and people said that there's no way that that's going to pass. As I share with you, based upon my limited knowledge, I didn't believe that people of color would do psilocybin mushrooms, would do ayahuasca. But then when you go to the continent of Africa and throughout the Caribbean, that's all that life. And so literally it's just having a disconnection from our birthright. So when I wrote the petition, we put it on the ballot, and people came out and voted. 61% of the people voted, and it passed. And that's what happened.
That's quite a story. Yeah. So why do you feel that these substances, these tinctures from the earth, basically, because we make them tinctures, but
Right.
why do you feel they heal? Like, what is the process, your experience with it?
I'll say it, there is a herb that deals with every medicinal ailment in our bodies. But that's the physical side. People forget that there are herbs and sacred plants that deal with every spiritual ailment in our bodies. So the sacred plants themselves are teachers. And so if you can kind of imagine that, they've been on this planet long before, I'll call it, long before human consciousness was here. They were here. So if you think about this from this perspective, if you study the Quran or the Bible, or even the Upanishads, some of the great books, most of the prophets sat with trees. And so as they say in that whole conversation, if a tree could talk, what would it say? The tree was there when Abraham, what we call Abram, we're talking about the Abrahamic religions, the trees were there. So just from that perspective alone, they became teachers because they had access to all that knowledge. If you want to go further than that, you can talk about, it's like, people like Nikola Tesla talks about energy, and that they say it's not destroyed, it's only transformed. So those teachers, the sacred plants, rather, it is ayahuasca, that's in central, primarily in the Americas. Mushrooms are on the caps, mushroom caps are on the pyramids in ancient Egypt and Kush. Then if you think about iboga, that's big in West Africa. The Dogon tribe, if you study the Dogon, there was a tribe in West Africa, and they would talk about the Sirius star. This was a star that before the 40s, the Dogon would always say, based upon their experiences with their teachers, Iboga, that there was this big star that people could never see with a naked eye, but they could see it because they said that they actually had been there. It wasn't until after man created this telescope, that they now call the Sirius star. And so these teachers have been here since the beginning of time. Of course, what's interesting is that, in America, they've incarcerated the plants. These plants were incarcerated, and the people that do that do the time. And so me having that experience myself, never would I have believed that was the case. But my teachers, the plants, begin to teach me. They begin to share with me my true birthright of shamanism, begin to reconfigure and to make me remember who I actually am. I was not the physical avatar that you see today. I've been in this world for, eons of time. And so that is what Soul Tribes Ministries is all about. We're literally one connectivity with different tribes from all over the planetary system coming together for our healing. We do things like teaching people the significance of breathing through breath work, just the significance of just like taking a moment to still your breath. Your listeners, your viewers, just that connectivity. That is the breath of the Creator. Just that one small thing makes a difference. We teach breath work. We teach meditation. We teach the significance of mudras, hand mudras. We teach the significance of yantras, and we teach the herbs. We teach all these different things. We teach the elements: fire, earth, air, water. That we actually have dominion over all those things. They were created, and there is a believer, people call it him or her the creator or the creative of the universe. But then they gave us the keys. After the universe was created, we as humans, if you will, that were made in his or her image, were given the keys and the authority over all these things. What would it mean if we can go have a conversation with a glass of water? What would it mean? Dr. Emoto, if you've heard of that person, that brilliant doctor, did actually a scientific experiment around water. And so he would put water in a petri dish and he would say, good water, good water, good water. And then put the same water in another petri dish, bad water, bad water, bad water. And then he would put it under a microscope and it would literally show the significance that what we say, words matter. And so and that's powerful. But then you go back and talk about the sacred plant, because the plant grows with water. It's all connected. Yeah. We're all connected from that perspective. When if you talk about, I'll call it the Bible, one of the mystery systems. When in the beginning they said they never talked about God creating water. It was just here. The face of God looked in the water, and I believe that that's just him and her as a mirror image to ourselves. So once we spoke, and he says once he spoke it, it separated the firmament, it separated the heavens from the earth. So we as humans or as his children have that same power. We can think something, then we speak it, and then it becomes a living manifestation. That's what we're all about. And that's what the sacred plants have been teaching us throughout this time period. And as you notice, you're in British Columbia, there's an awakening happening all over the planet. They're saying we need to come back and heal our world. Yeah. And so they came and talked to me. I never would be doing this. Like it was nowhere in my goals. Yeah. It's nowhere at all. Not at all. But so here I am now, focused on helping to transform our planet, utilizing all of the things, all the modalities that the Creator has given us, including the sacred plant.
Yeah. So like it very much came to you, like a calling, basically, right? That's what it sounds like. To me, I mean, I've had interviews with people who also, talk to angels, and they're a part of their life, and they're sort of like the voices they hear and connect with, and sort of helps them make the next step and then, next decision, and I came from a place where I guess I didn't really think that all of that could possibly be true, though if I think about my early childhood, I was full of that creative energies and very comfortable with, other entities that are around. And, and it's funny, it's like there was a moment in which I could see like disconnecting from it. And then and I went through my course. I did the lawyer stuff first, and then I became the doctor stuff, more trying to figure out how to empower people, because it's kind of both. It's understanding the systems we're in to finally liberate ourselves from the systems and actually reconnect to who we really are, so
very powerful. That is so true.
Yeah, ayahuasca was a big part of my my awakening too.
Ayahuasca, I love it. Yeah.
Because I remember asking, you'll laugh at this. It's like, you had to figure out what question do you want to put out there. So I had two primary questions. My first one is, and it's funny, I need a business plan. It's just like
Mhm.
typically what you ask ayahuasca, right? But I'm very passionate about the school that I run and how it
Mm, mm.
leads to people. And I want it to have like clarity on what it is I'm not seeing, you know? And the other one was to reconnect me to my intuition because
Right, right,
I
right.
had lost track of that. It's almost like I didn't, you know, when you stand in that I don't know, but you're not comfortable with it.
Yes. Mhm.
Like you don't know where the answer comes from. Your mind, you can see doing rational things. Other parts of you, your body might be expressing signs and symptoms, but it's like we're all separate instead of being
Right,
all one, right?
right,
So,
right, right, right.
so I went to
Mhm.
many sessions saying, show me give me
Show me
the
who I've become. Mhm.
show me show me what intuition is, and
Right.
it took a while, you know, just, a sign of how disconnected, despite doing, great work in naturopathic medicine and really,
Mm.
facilitate the healing. In the end, I think, all healers, so-called healers,
Mhm.
have to have their profound healing, and there's no end to it. It just goes
Oh no. Mhm.
in
That's every
phases.
day.
Yeah, and
Every
great
day.
depth,
It's an everyday thing. I say, it's, having those experiences, people used to call them trips, but they're really not trips.
No,
It's a journey. It's a journey because a
learning.
trip is a
Yes.
destination and you never finish that process. So every day I'm focusing on my healing and utilizing me as my own testimony to share with people, I am the miracle. If you go back and look at my background and look at where I came from, how they say they never choose the guy that qualifies. So when you start talking about teaching who you are, you're never qualified to go on this path. I was never qualified to talk about shamanism and be in that space. And it just happened. It just happened because I listened to my teachers. And so
Right.
I was a very obedient student, you know. And so that if there's anything, just being an obedient student, that process got me to where I am now. Literally having ayahuasca, I never would have tried it. But
Mhm.
as you said, they called me to Costa Rica. And literally, I thought we were going on a plant-based retreat, but it wound up being an ayahuasca retreat. And so, literally was a unique experience after that moment. So we'll go back to Detroit and liberate urban people. I said, wait a minute, nobody's going to do this. This is a white person thing. I'm being, totally transparent and that, but it wasn't the truth. Those were things, those were, I call it parts of the matrix that were
Right.
lies that we've been taught and we've told ourselves over this time period. So then coming back,
Mhm.
taking Detroit, now Detroit's the largest city in America for plant medicine. The whole, just one experience, just being obedient.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we just recently just acquired a church, a 62,000 square foot church. It's a whole city block. And we're getting ready to renovate this building so people can have access to their healing. And so I'm just leading. I keep saying, I am the miracle. I'm the miracle, like me. And
Right.
so I believe that everyone that has an experience, they get to be the miracle as well.
What would your life be like if you were pain-free? If you were one of the millions who suffer from chronic pain, the thought of just one day without it may seem impossible. This is often because conventional medicine tends to fall short in the treatment of pain, opting to prescribe pills or recommend surgery rather than getting to the root cause of the problem. But if you are suffering with emotional or physical pain, there is hope. Join the founder and CEO of Bowen College, Manon Bolliger, live online for your body-mind reboot. Learn how to listen to your symptoms and get to the root cause of your pain. Plus, be trained in basic Bowen therapy moves so that you can reboot your body for optimal health. You don't have to live in pain. You can heal. Stop the pain pill cycle by visiting www.yourbodymindreboot.com to learn more and to register.
They themselves can say, well, look at me, look at where I came from. Whatever that life looked like. Maybe you came in this world impoverished. Maybe you had domestic violence, or maybe you had parents that didn't believe in you and they told you what you couldn't be. And all of a sudden you listened and you got it. And then you became the miracle. You became the guy or the girl that didn't qualify.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
they always choose the guy that doesn't qualify. It's historical. You know, if you look at biblical times, Moses was a stutterer, but they chose him to have him go say, let my people go. Like, you know, and how to say Abraham was a father of many nations, but him and Sarah couldn't even have any children. It was a joke. Like, you know, the universe has a sense of humor. You know, and so from that perspective, and if you look at, you know, rather it's, you know, the Bible or the Upanishads or the Book of the Dead, it's always some strange thing that doesn't make, I'll call it, logical sense. But yet, if we pull ourselves out of the matrix and understand that it's just you being obedient to your great teachers, and our great teachers are the elements. Until we understand that power of it, we get to be empowered, if you will.
Yeah. So why do you think that, you know, some people call it the Great Awakening, or what is happening now, where there's seems to be a much higher frequency, much more awakening, much more people aware that there is a matrix? Why do you feel that this is happening now?
People, there's more information out here than ever before. Due to social media, you know, there was always somebody in another part of the world. And as they say, you know, the world isn't really round; it's flat. And I mean it jokingly, but because that now we're actually able to connect with social media and the internet, we can talk to people all over this planet. So that information is now being connected back into people. And because so many people are being awakened, and they're not being tricked, because people perish for lack of knowledge or lack of information. And so when there is information, you have people seeking the truth, it forces the truth to show up.
Right.
You know, where it forces that experience. That's just I'll call it in a humanistic perspective. But I always say we teach this message that we're all spiritual beings wearing leather suits. You know, and some people have dark skin suits, some people have light skin suits, some people have suits with long hair, some people have suits with short hair, but we're all spiritual beings rocking leather suits. And so from the time I leave this suit, I may jump into another suit or another avatar. I get to take that knowledge back. So what the sacred plant does, it reminds you that, wait a minute, you're just in a leather suit. This is who you really are. And I had forgotten who I was. It was a trick, you know, and they call it, rather you talk about the Anunnaki or some of those great writings, it was this fallacy to have us believe that we were not who we really are. And so now being in a position to know who I am, or also whose I am, gives me great power. And the plants are doing it. Think about it. I was never the guy that qualified. I'm talking about being a corporator, and now I'm saying let's heal people. Like it was not on my mental perspective, but really, if I go back in my entire life, I've been on this journey the entire time. I just forgot who I was until literally the scales came off of my eyes, and I said, wait a minute, this is who I am. This is how I'm able to be my best self. And in being my best self, I get to be the miracle, to show people that, wait a minute, you can transform yourself.
So what do you think then, looking at it, you know, over your own life, what is the purpose of all this?
Well, I think Michael Jackson said it best. I'm going to look at the man or woman in the mirror, and I'm going to start with me. And so rather than, you know, complain about our sex, drugs, and violence on the VCR, the sex, drugs, and violence on the television, or the sex, drugs, and violence on your social media channel, you get to determine who you choose to be. Where it was a period of time that you were told you had to be this certain way. Like, you know, in America, you know, people of color was told that this is what you're supposed to be and this is all you could do. But it doesn't say that if you read the ancient writings, as you think, your thought, word, deed. The ancient Kemetic pyramids said thought, your word, and deed. And so if you understand that perspective, you can get here in this lifetime or another. But if you continue to stay on that path, that will happen for you. So the purpose, I learned, you know, I don't know if who had this movie called The Jerk with Steve Martin. He was a famous guy in the movie.
I know Steve Martin, but I don't think I know The Jerk.
Yeah, so it was a funny movie, and he was like, I'm trying to find my purpose, and so this is my purpose. We would go get a chair and say, my purpose is a chair, and then he would get a book and a dog. This is my purpose. But really, I've learned that if you're trying to find your purpose, if you live in excellence every day to be the best person you can be, purpose will find you. You don't have to go find purpose. If you live in your best self, purpose will find you. And that's exactly what is shown up for people that live being their best people, their best selves. It will find you.
It's the reverse of what
Right.
imagine it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That is true. It will find you when you live in your highest brand. Your highest self will find you. I wasn't on the in any way, short or form or fashion to be a shaman. It didn't exist anywhere in my life. I thought that was like, what? Who, me? Like, but I knew that if I were obedient to my teachers and obedient to what I was learning, it found me. And so now I've traveled around this planet of people that I've taken through these sacred plant medicine journeys that would have never tried that before. But because of my background and my profile, my experience and my losses. And so they get to see that I am the miracle. Like I teach people that your purpose, you are the miracle, be the miracle. You get to say that you transform your life a different way and you can walk in that space and it keeps you at a higher vibration any and all the time.
So when people use the word healing, what comes to your mind? How do you explain healing? Is there such a thing? Are we doing this? What is healing to you?
That's a tricky word.
Yes.
It's the tricky word. It's an internal thought process. What is healing to you? There are things, and I go back to the ing. The ing is always it is healing, feeling. From that vantage point, you're always moving to something different. You're not healed, you're healing, and so that it keeps a work in progress. As I was a vegetarian for many years, and I thought I was onto something because I'm a vegetarian. I'm different, but guess what? I now see vegetarians that die at younger ages. Why are they dying? Because they focus on the external food they were put in their bodies, and they forgot about healing themselves from their own traumas. And I've seen other people that eat everything, but they have dealt with trauma. They've dealt with their higher self, so they live and have a longevity and a beautiful life. We forget about the healing is mind, body, spirit. It's just not one, it's amazing. It's not one piece of it. It's everything.
Yeah. Yeah, because
So I'm still healing every day.
Yeah. I had this this kind of thought, that I had a clinic I called Healing What Is.
Love it.
Then I thought, is that actually true? And then I came up with another thought, is that how you live is how you heal, because really what we're doing is living, like living consciously, because the idea that we have to heal something that we aren't already good enough as we are is also kind of a journey that one can take. But is it really true? Or is it just that we're liberating ourselves from conceptions and misconceptions and thoughts that don't serve us, that are the antithesis of our sovereign being? So
we teach that we teach that people have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. Most of those thoughts are negative, and most of them are not our own.
Right.
Did you catch that? They're not even our thoughts.
Yeah.
These are programs that we're plugging into. And so that's the power of the sacred plant, or the power of breath work and some of those other things, because it pulls you. It's so alarming. You talked about the Great Awakening. I'll call it the Great Alarm. Like, it is so alarming to go from this experience to another experience. Wait a minute. You mean I've been lied to? You mean, wait a minute, I thought I was really doing something. But when you get into the spiritual realm, and you're starting to understand that we really are spiritual beings, because you can't cheat it when you're with a sacred plant. It's not like watching a movie and you get to turn the channel, or you get to get in a car and you don't like the direction you're going, you get to change. No, when you jump into that sacred plant, you're there for that 6 to 8 hour journey. And so you can't cheat the class, you can't quit, you're there until the class is over with.
Right. And is your understanding of that process that the who is there is the part of you that you need to see, the part of you that has to, I don't want to use words like that, but that is dealing with whatever's happening in its environment, in its
I say
journey, so to speak.
Yeah, it's definitely a healing journey. When you have those experiences, we all have ancestral memory.
Hmm.
And so when you have the ability to go and connect into the ancestral realm, which is the true realm, that is what you're experiencing. I'm not talking about, I know people do soothsaying and they do use mediums, but you get to eliminate all of that because it's you and the creator.
Right.
It's just you, and so you're actually able to see, as Michael Jackson says, the man and a woman in the mirror, starting with me. But the mirror is unique, as I talked about water, and the creator looked at his or her face in the water in the very beginning. It literally is that. So you get to connect to your entire, I'll call it your entire consciousness of God, the consciousness of what they would call the Akashic records, if you will.
Right.
But a little deeper than that, or a little connect, is the consciousness of the great I am. You get to connect into all of that. And so if you understand that they are teachers, you get to go to your teacher and say, teach me about this class. You get
Right.
to ask specific questions. And so as you talked about a business plan, and so we can call it our human design,
Right.
that anything is possible when we understand, as they talked about in the Emerald Tablets of Tahuti, and those types of things, like literally your thoughts, then in your word and your deed. Now imagine if you have elevated out of your physical leather suit, your avatar, and you're just a spiritual being, which means you can manifest anything at that moment. That is the power that we actually have. And so that is what we teach at Soul Tribes. And that is why, why I'm having these conversations now. We have a say in our transformation.
Right. So, but wow, I can't believe how quickly our time went by. But I have one other question, just because it's top of mind to a lot of people who are coming to realize that they've been lied to on many levels, many profound levels, and many medical levels.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the information is coming out 3D level. What's coming out is extremely scary, and I've seen that healing and fear don't work well together. You have
Right.
to,
Mm-hmm.
but the thing is, you do have to see the reality on one level. You have to accept what has happened on some level, I believe, to be able to to get through this, and yeah, I'm talking about like I don't know what I can say that. Well, anyway, I'm banned anyways. It doesn't matter. We're on Rumble, but
Mm-hmm.
but when people realize that they have all these things growing in them, or they have these factories of spike, and you hear doctors say that it's like ticking time bombs. For me, I just, it doesn't feel that it could be true. It has shown true. I mean, some people are dropping, lots of people are dropping, and
Yeah.
they're putting two and two together. Okay. But is everyone going to drop? And I just feel like, no, there's something that in this realm that shifts that reality, that the frequency of the 3D.
Right.
So I don't know if I'm it's not a good question, but do you have
I'm connecting with you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm connecting. I'll connect this way. As you said, when you have a fifth dimension experience and you only have a third dimension vocabulary, how can you really express what you're trying to say? So
Okay.
I'm connecting what you're saying. I believe in this, and I'll call it this time, and this divine time, because time is not a reality in itself.
No.
But I'll say in this divine discussion that we're having right now, you'll find that the avatars that we all live in will last longer. And the reason that they'll last longer is because the spiritual beings have made a decision in connecting to their ancestors that this is what we need to do. We need to stay in this dimension longer because we got more work to do. Well, if you go back before that time period, of course, westernized science, came into this world, and that's why they call it a practice. These guys are just practicing. They're practicing. So, and practice does not make perfect. Practice just makes more practice.
Yeah.
And so, but the perfected systems were the elements. Those things were perfected. The sun does not need to have an alarm clock to know what time to wake up every morning.
Mhm.
He doesn't need to talk. He doesn't need an alarm clock to do that. nor does the moon. They just know. And so, and it's the same thing in our internal selves. There is a knowing that, you've always known. You talked about, when you were a kid. And so when we come into this world, we actually know ourselves as a kid, and then Matrix tells us we must operate a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
The uniqueness of you and I and others that are connected in this tribe, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and about reaffirming, reawakening, realarming ourselves. There has been a trumpet that has been sounded, and it's our time to do the work. We cannot be afraid. I understand. I heard you say, "Man, I've been through some stuff. I understand." But you know what's so powerful about that? And this is interesting, and this is an old hood cliche. Nothing can grow if it don't have any dirt on
Exactly.
it.
No,
all
I think
all great things come out of the earth.
yeah.
All great things come out of darkness. They come out of dark places. We sat in our mother's womb for 9, sometimes 10 months in pure darkness to become the manifestations that we are right now.
Yeah.
When you want to grow an orange blossom or an apple tree, it's a seed that goes into the dark soil. And so you got to go through something to get to something. And so we just have to remember that is, what we're required to do right now. I myself would have never, I would have never signed up for this.
Yeah.
But I am being so obedient right now because I now understand that there was a trumpet that's been sounded. I've been given a special set of skills, if you will, like the movie Taken, to do certain things right now. So in a short journey, we went from decriminalizing a city to set up a whole ministry, Soul Tribes, international ministries. People can go to our website, soultribes.org, pick it up. And now we just bought a 97-year-old church that has an underground railroad tunnel in the building. Could not have thought about this. And I got this building, which is interesting. I got it through a ceremony. They told me, you're going to have a church. And I laughed. I said, they told me we're going to have this church. And I got up and I was obedient, and then I was able to get it done. That stuff happens when we are obedient to what we've been asked to do.
Beautiful. I'm going to leave you with those last words, and all the links will be under our both, wherever we're showing up.
Oh, my sister, thank you so much. It has been a blessing. I see all those books. So I know you're a great manifester. You continue to manifest, and do not let anyone distract you from what the Creator has told you to do. Fight, fight, fight to the end. And guess what? When you come back again, do it again.
It appears to be the destiny.
You can't stop that.
No.
Just be obedient to the call. And in the end, when the trumpet is sounded, and when you actually go and have your place of peace, they will say, "Good job. You're good and faithful servant. Good job." Thank you, my sister.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers, cheers.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Manon Bolliger. Continue your healing journey by visiting thehealerscafe.com and her website, and discover how to listen to your body and reboot for optimal health.